What if the pyramids weren't just tombs, but messages? What if every stone was placed with purpose, to align not only with stars, but with something deeper, something ancient, something forgotten? Tonight, we're not just exploring history, we're entering a mystery, carved in silence, shaped by numbers, and buried beneath time itself. This is 25 Secrets of the Pyramid for Sleep. Let your body rest, your mind drift, and your spirit travel back through desert winds and starlit skies, to a world where stone breathes, where geometry speaks, and where secrets still whisper in the dark. Before we begin, help us reach our first 200 subscribers by tapping the subscribe button, and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're building a peaceful community of midnight minds from around the world. Now breathe deep, let the sands settle, and prepare to uncover the first secret. Secret 1. The breath of stone. There is a silence older than words and deeper than memory, a silence that waits not to be broken but to be noticed. Beneath the desert sky, where the heat folds into dusk and the light falls long across ancient limestone, the pyramid stands not as a ruin, not as a monument, but as a presence. Its stones do not echo, yet they seem to whisper. Its edges do not move, yet they hum with balance. And if you listen not with your ears but with your body, with the soft spaces between thoughts, you may feel it, the breath of stone. It does not inhale as we do, it does not exhale through mouth or nostril, but it breathes in the way a forest breathes, in the way the sea keeps rhythm, in the way the stars return each night without fail. The pyramid is not dead rock, it is living precision, and the air around it, warmed by day, cooled by night, moves in slow spirals, as though the stones have learned how to draw the desert close, to keep its secrets tucked in the mortar of time. And this breath, this unseen rhythm, speaks without speech. It tells you slowly that you are not the first to feel small beside it, and you will not be the last, that you do not need to understand to belong. That stillness, when deep enough, becomes a voice of its own. It is here, in this breath of stone, that the pyramid begins to speak. Secret 2. The shadow that tells time. There is no ticking here, no swinging pendulum, no chime to divide the hour, yet the pyramid tells time, not with numbers but with shadow. Each day, as the sun climbs its wide arc across the sky, the light drapes itself along the faces of the pyramid, and the shadow follows, stretching, bending, retreating, like an invisible hand, pointing across the sand. No man needs a clock to see the hour in this place. No bell is needed to mark the moment. The pyramid's silence is its clock tower. Its stillness is its rhythm. For thousands of years this dance of light and dark has continued, the sun rising always on the same face, setting always behind the same stones, and the shadow always shifting, like the pages of a book turned by light. To those who waited and watched, it was not just beauty, it was order, it was the sky, confirming the stones. The pyramid does not just cast a shadow, it accepts time into its very geometry. It receives the sun as an old friend, a guest who arrives each day not to rush, but to reveal. Here, you learn that time need not be fast to be faithful. It can move slow, it can move softly, and it can be told in shadow. Secret 3. The weight you cannot feel. Not all weight presses downward. Some weight, like silence, expands outward. It holds space. It shapes the world around it, not by pressure, but by presence. The pyramid's weight is immeasurable, not because it crushes, but because it persists. Block upon block, layer upon layer, it rises, and yet, standing beside it, you do not feel burdened, you feel lifted, not by the stones, but by the intention behind them, by the unseen design that makes weight feel like grace. The stones weigh tons, yet they seem to hover on purpose alone, as if each one remembers the hands that placed it, as if the structure remembers the breath of the builder. And in your chest, as you stand close, something stirs, not because of pressure, but because of presence. The pyramid does not move, and yet it moves something in you. It speaks in weightless weight, a paradox, only understood in silence. It is here you realize, heaviness can be holy. Secret 4. the angle that speaks to the sky. Look not just at the size but the shape. The pyramid's slant is no accident. Each face climbs not straight, but inward, converging toward a peak that no longer exists, yet still guides the eye. And if you trace that angle into the air, you find not just sky, but stars. The slope of the pyramid is a stair. The eye ascends. It is an invitation, not just upward, but outward, not just toward height, but toward wonder. This is not geometry for beauty's sake. It is geometry as language. The pyramid does not shout its message. It leans toward the heavens and listens. Its angles speak in silence. They catch the morning sun. They reflect the setting glow. They echo constellations. The builders knew that shape is not neutral. It can aim. It can reach. And here you are reminded, your soul, like stone, can be angled toward the divine, even without a capstone. The pyramid still points, not to itself, but to something greater, and in doing so, it tells you that stillness is not stagnation, it is alignment. Secret 5. The light that never flickers. It is easy to forget that light has weight, not in the way stone does, not in the sense of gravity or pressure, but in the way it lingers, the way it bends around corners and fills every crack of absence with quiet presence. And within the walls of the pyramid, where sunlight once spilled through open shafts and touched smooth limestone, there existed a light that did not flicker like a candle or break like a bulb, but moved softly, like memory, like breath, illuminating the interior not with fire but with stillness. The pyramid was not built for darkness, though it contains much of it, nor was it shaped merely for secrecy, though it guards many, but it was arranged in such a way that light was welcomed like a guest, channeled, focused, honored, so that even the smallest ray, when invited through the narrowest passage, would fall exactly where it was meant to fall, illuminating not by accident but by design. They say that the ancient stone glowed, not from within but because the outer casing, now lost, once reflected sunlight so brightly that the pyramid shone like a beacon, like a mirror to the heavens, its surface not just sheltering history, but announcing something sacred to the sky. And here, in that reflection, you begin to see that light is not just to see by, it is to remember by, to align by, to dwell in, as though you were never meant for the dim corners of distraction, but for the steady presence of something that never flickers, never fails, and never forgets where you are. Secret 6. The chamber that waits without speaking. There is a room in the pyramid tucked so deep and surrounded by such immense weight that sound cannot find a home there, a chamber not carved for echo, but for stillness, where silence is not the absence of noise, but the presence of purpose, and where those who enter do not hear answers, but are asked instead to listen differently, not with ears or mind but with heart. No inscriptions decorate the walls, no names are etched in royal boast, no markings tell you who this place was made for, and yet it was made with care, with a kind of devotion too sacred to be explained in writing, a devotion that says, this place matters not because of what is said inside, but because of what is held in its silence. This is not a silence that forgets, it is a silence that keeps. It guards what has been entrusted to it, not with locks, but with gravity, not with secrets, but with reverence, and it reminds you that sometimes the holiest spaces are the ones where no voice is raised, where no performance takes place, where the soul enters and leaves lighter than it arrived. And in this chamber, whether in body or in dream, you are given permission to stop explaining, stop proving, stop moving, and instead to simply remain, as stone remains, as truth remains, as presence, quiet and full, remain. Secret 7. The alignment that cannot be coincidence. To stand beside the pyramid is to stand beside something that listens to the stars, for its edges do not drift like sand, and its corners do not wander like branches. They point, they anchor, they align, and this alignment, which places each face toward a cardinal direction, with such precision that modern compasses bow in respect, is not mere coincidence or accident of terrain, but an act of intention so precise it begs the question, how did they know? How did hands that never touched satellites and eyes that never saw telescopes understand the Earth's orientation better than machines with maps, better than cities with charts. And the answer, perhaps, lies not only in the stones, but in the hearts of those who laid them, a heart tuned not to haste, but to harmony, not to convenience but to eternal design, for the pyramid does not scream for attention, it simply agrees with the sky. Its placement, they say, mirrors constellations. Its structure reflects patterns far beyond this planet. It is a fingerprint of the cosmos pressed into stone, and in that fingerprint is the gentle reminder that there is an order to things, even when we forget it, even when the world spins too fast to see it. The pyramid stands as if to say, align yourself, not with fear, not with noise, but with truth, and with what is steady, and with what waits in the stars above you, unmoved, undistracted, undiminished. Secret 8. The stone that listens to silence. Every stone placed in the pyramid, and there are so many that counting them becomes less an act of arithmetic, and more an act of awe, was shaped not just for strength, but for silence, for the way it would fit without mortar, locked into its neighbor with such devotion that the walls feel seamless, as if the entire structure were not built block by block but grown whole from the earth itself. And these stones, silent though they are, do not merely hold weight, they hold memory, not memory as we define it, with dates and dialogue, but memory of rhythm, memory of pressure, memory of waiting. They have listened to the wind scratch across their surface. For thousands of years, they have heard footsteps echo, voices pray, scholars measure, and yet they do not speak, they absorb. The pyramid does not repeat back what it has heard, it does not give you its story plain. Instead it invites you to lean in close, to place your hand on stone still warm from the day's light, and feel what cannot be said, because some truths are not passed down in words, they are held in form, in arrangement, in stillness that has learned to listen. And here you are reminded, it is not always the voice that teaches, it is the listening, the enduring, the quiet, the willing presence that receives all without demand, and remains. Secret 9. The capstone that was never placed. At the very top of the pyramid, there should have been a final stone, a point of completion, a crown of convergence, a capstone carved to rest at the summit, where all four sides meet in perfect unity, and yet it is gone, or perhaps it was never placed at all. Some say it was made of gold, a radiant pinnacle meant to catch the light of dawn and scatter it like prophecy across the desert sands, while others whisper that the builders left the summit unfinished on purpose, as if to leave space for something beyond human touch, beyond human pride, a space for the divine alone. And so the pyramid, though immense, though eternal, ends with a breath, not a period, a gesture, not a grasp. Its final point never rests in stone, but in the imagination of those who stand beneath it, looking upward through time, wondering what was meant to be there, or if the missing piece was the message itself, that not all things must be finished to be perfect, that not all completion is visible, that some crowns are invisible on purpose. It is a mystery built into the highest point, and in that mystery is a freedom, to leave room for God, to accept that even the most exact geometry may reach a place where it must stop, and simply trust the sky. Secret 10. The chamber that was never found. Beneath the base of the pyramid, deeper than the stones, deeper than the visible earth, there are rumors of another chamber, one that has not been seen, measured, or confirmed, but felt, as if the structure breathes down as well as up, pulling your awareness lower, toward a place where sound no longer echoes, where light has never been seen, where something ancient waits, not hidden but resting. Not every space is built to be found. Some are built to hold absence, to remind us that knowledge has a border, that discovery can go only so far before reverence begins. And though the pyramid is measured in meters and mapped in every direction, there are still places inside it that no one has entered, corners that do not exist on paper, but live quietly beneath the dust, not forgotten, not missed, but honored through mystery. And you begin to sense that what lies beneath is not a room with walls and corners, but a sanctuary of silence, a place designed to hold stillness, a reminder that not all truths rise to meet you. Some dwell beneath, unspoken, waiting only to be honored. not exposed. Secret 11. The stone that can't be lifted alone. There are stones within the pyramid, so massive, so impossibly heavy, that even today we do not know how they were lifted, carried, or set into place. No crane could reach them. No simple machine explains. They rest above chambers, between shafts, along the corridors of eternity, and they remain immovable, not just by mass, but by purpose. These stones were never meant to be moved alone. They are declarations of unity, weight that could only be borne together. They do not exist to impress with size alone. They exist to remind us that some burdens are sacred, because they must be shared, that no one hand could have placed, that trust was required, coordination, harmony, hundreds of voices moving as one heartbeat, raising not just stone, but the spirit of cooperation. And now, as you listen, you are reminded that the heaviest things you carry were never meant to be borne in isolation, that just as these ancient builders joined their strength for a single purpose, so too must you allow yourself to be held, lifted, accompanied, for even in silence, the pyramid speaks of shared weight, and of the beauty that rises from. Secret 12. The shaft that reaches towards stars. Cut through the heart of the pyramid are narrow shafts, tunnels so tight that no person could crawl through them, and yet they are not random. They point directly to stars, to Orion, to Sirius, to constellations named and watched for millennia. These are not vents, they are messages, not for air, but for alignment, not for survival, but for eternal orientation. Imagine carving a tunnel through solid stone, not to escape, but to aim, to lock the heart of the structure with the cosmos above. Imagine designing a passage not to pass through, but to see through, to say we were here, we were watching, we belonged to something higher than ourselves. The stars may change their names, but they do not lose their places, and the shafts still point even now, their aim unchanged, their purpose untouched. They are not merely features of architecture, but prayers made permanent, longing cast into stone. And you listening now beneath the quiet of your own ceiling, are reminded that no matter how low you feel, you may still point yourself toward light, that no matter how hidden your passage feels, it may still open to the heavens, steady, silent, and true. Secret 13. The ratio that breathes without sound. Hidden in the angles, the distances, the rise and run of the pyramid's sloping faces, is a number, not etched, not announced, not written on a single stone, yet present like breath in a sleeping body, the golden ratio, the divine proportion, phi, the quiet mathematics of beauty that appears in seashells and galaxies, and the curves of the human form, now rising from the sands of Egypt in monumental stillness. This is not coincidence. This is not decoration. This is ancient knowledge pressed into stone, not as a boast, but as a rhythm, a kind of cosmic music frozen into geometry. The pyramid does not call attention to it. It simply abides by it, obeys the silent logic of harmony so thoroughly that the body feels it before the mind understands. The golden ratio is not just in art or biology, it is in alignment, in design, in the ways things grow without chaos. It teaches us that balance is not always symmetry, that beauty does not shout, that perfection can be quiet. And when you lie beneath this knowledge, not trying to solve it, but simply letting it surround you, you begin to feel that there is order, even when you feel disordered, that there is proportion, even when life feels lopsided, that something ancient and calm is always holding the edges of chaos with invisible hands. Secret 14. The silence, measured in cubits. The ancient Egyptians did not measure by meters, or feet, or inches. They used the cubit, the length from elbow to fingertip, the span of a human arm, not a cold unit of precision, but a gesture, a living measure that connected the builder to the built, the human to the eternal. Every stone was measured by body, not by machine, and in doing so the pyramid became a translation of man into monument. There is something holy in this, in building, not to impress, but to align, in using the body, not just as labor, but as compass. The pyramid was not made by distant calculation, but by intimate repetition, arm after arm, reach after reach, until the very structure seemed to echo the proportions of the people who raised it. And in this silence, measured in cubits, you are reminded that scale is not everything, that greatness is not always in size, but in intention, in care, in the quiet repetition of one faithful motion after another. That even something as massive as the pyramid was built by small human arms, over time, with trust, with no need to hurry, and perhaps your life too is being shaped cubit by cubit, unseen, but deliberate, quiet but sacred. Secret 15. The dust that holds the memory of hands. Between the great stones, beneath the cracks, above the hidden chambers, there lies a soft layer that no tourist photographs, that no drone can capture. Dust, fine as ash, quiet as breath, older than any living man. And within that dust is not just time, but touch, the fading evidence of the hands that once smoothed mortar, lifted tools, wiped sweat from brows, adjusted angles by candlelight, and whispered prayers to gods whose names have fallen silent. This dust is not decay, it is memory, not of kings, but of laborers, not of rulers, but of builders, not of plans, but of presence. And it waits still, untouched, unpraised, but faithful, for dust does not need to be seen to remember. It holds the past, like a shawl, wrapped in silence, letting each grain tell a story without voice. The pyramid is often spoken of as the tomb of a pharaoh, but perhaps it is also the sanctuary of workers, a monument not only to vision, but to obedience, to patience, to hands that never wrote their names, but left fingerprints on eternity. And tonight, as you listen, you are invited to honor the invisible, the quiet particles of your own past, the forgotten efforts, the silent offerings, for dust remembers, and in its memory, there is a kind of blessing. Secret 16. The passage that descends without end. There is a passage that leads downward, not just into stone, but into silence, so thick, it presses against the soul, a shaft that descends not to a chamber, or a grave, but deeper still, as if reaching for the core of the world. A corridor, so narrow and steep that breath shortens with each step, and time itself seems to slow as the light fades behind you. This is not a descent into darkness, but into mystery, a surrender, a turning inward, a journey where the mind cannot lead, and only the spirit remains awake. They say the builders carved downward first, before anything else, as if to root the entire monument in humility, in anchoring, in a descent that must precede ascent. And though many fear the downward path, here it is honored. It is not collapse, it is not defeat, it is descent with purpose, chosen willingly, a movement toward origin, toward source, toward a stillness, so deep, it touches the unshaped. The pyramid's descent teaches us that depth is not the opposite of growth, it is its foundation, that before there can be glory, there must be grounding, that the soul, like stone, must travel inward to rise outward. Secret 17. The line that divides light from light. Across the face of the pyramid runs an invisible line, not drawn, not carved, not marked by tool or pigment, but etched by the shifting hand of the sun, a perfect split of shadow and brightness that changes hour by hour, season by season, and yet always remains faithful to the dance of light across stone. This line is not harsh, not fixed, but a whisper, a gentle reminder that even light has divisions, that even the purest illumination carries within it a moment of contrast, a balance of brightness and pause. And in this balance, there is wonder, not because light is better than shadow, or shadow deeper than light, but because they meet in silence, and in their meeting, something sacred is made. The builders did not resist this line, they welcomed it, built for it, aligned every surface, so that this unseeable border would flow across their creation, like a ribbon of time. It does not separate opposites, it unites them. It teaches the soul to find holiness in tension, to see peace, not in one extreme or the other, but in the ever-moving edge, where presence and absence touch. And perhaps as you rest beneath your own shifting thoughts, you will find a similar line, not to divide, but to unify, to mark the place where both joy and sorrow meet, and call each other by name. Secret 18. The purpose hidden in repetition. Stone after stone, layer after layer, row upon row, the pyramid rises not by accident or improvisation, but by unyielding repetition, by a rhythm, so steady it becomes invisible, so constant it becomes holy. There is no chaos in the order of its building. Each block was placed not once, but countless times in the imagination before ever being lifted. The plan was not guessed, it was honored, and within that repetition, the hammering, the measuring, the hauling, the fitting, there was purpose, not in the finished shape alone, but in the act itself. The pyramid is not only a monument to vision, but to endurance, to the sacredness of doing the same thing again and again, not in vain, but in love. The builders did not ask for newness, they asked for faithfulness. They laid stone like breath, each one part of the whole, each one essential, each one unseen by the eye, but known by the structure. And in your life too there are repetitions, acts done daily, choices made quietly, burdens carried consistently, and these too are sacred. They are your stones, they are your offering, they rise in you like a pyramid no one else sees but heaven watches closely, and in the quiet rhythm of your days, something ancient is being built. Secret 19. The tunnel that faces nowhere. There is a corridor buried within the pyramid that leads to nothing, a shaft narrow and precise, that simply ends, not in a room or a throne, or a secret chamber, but in stone. It begins with purpose and ends in mystery, and for generations, its meaning has remained unspoken, but perhaps that is the meaning. Not every path must open to a destination, not every beginning must conclude with discovery. Some tunnels exist only to remind us of what it means to search, to reach, to carve forward without knowing where the end lies. The builders, so exact in every other part of their creation, left this tunnel untouched by explanation, as if to say there is glory in going nowhere, if the journey itself is whole. And in your own life, there may be efforts that do not resolve, questions that remain unanswered, directions that halt in silence, and still those paths matter, still they shape you, still they carry you inward, where perhaps the treasure is not in what you find, but in who you become while seeking. The pyramid does not apologize for this tunnel, it honors it, and so may you. Secret 20. The summit that belongs to the sky. Though the pyramid rises from earth, built by hands, designed by minds, formed by sweat and stone, its final gesture is not downward but upward. It lifts not as a stairway but as a its four faces, angled and symmetrical, converge toward a peak that points not to itself, but to something beyond, something unseen, something that cannot be held in brick or bronze, the sky. And here at the imagined summit, where the capstone once might have rested, or perhaps never did, the pyramid stops, not because it cannot go higher, but because it chooses to point instead. It knows where it ends, and where something greater begins. The builders understood that the highest point must not be a platform for ego, but a threshold for awe, and so they shaped their masterpiece to conclude not in possession, but in release. It is not a tower, it is a gesture, and you, resting now beneath your own invisible stars, are invited to do the same, to lift your life, your story, your questions towards something larger, not for answers but for alignment. The summit does not belong to man, it belongs to the sky, and in that surrender there is peace. Secret 21. The wind that sings without voice. Around the base of the pyramid, the wind does not roar, it drifts, soft and tireless, like a hymn whispered through the corridors of time, brushing against stone, warmed by centuries, gliding over edges carved not just by hands, but by intention, older than memory. This wind does not seek to scatter or to destroy, it seeks only to touch, to remind, to carry the scent of silence and sand across the air like a psalm forgotten by the world, but still remembered by the desert. When you stand near the pyramid, it is not the structure's grandeur that speaks first, but this quiet wind, this presence that touches your skin before your heart knows why it stirs. You cannot see its source, you cannot trace its path, but you feel that it has come from far, that it has moved across miles of dust and sky just to meet this moment. And now, brushing past your breath, it tells you something wordless, that peace travels, that sound is not the only language, that presence can sing even in silence. The pyramid does not need to speak, for the wind sings its memory. It does not ask for an audience, for the air itself carries its legacy. And you, lying in the stillness of night, can feel that same wind pass gently through your own story, not to disturb, but to remind you that you are part of something carried, something touched, something held by the breath of the ages. Secret 22. The foundation buried on purpose. Beneath all the majesty, beneath the visible stone and the open air, there lies something deeper, a foundation not made for glory, not meant to be seen or praised, but placed with greater care than all else. A bed of stability upon which the entire pyramid rests, buried, not because it is unimportant, but because it is sacred. The ancients knew that height without depth is collapse waiting in silence. They did not begin with crowns. They began with roots. The base of the pyramid disappears beneath the sand, hidden from the eyes of those who gaze upward, but it is what holds the weight of everything else. No triumph can rise without such anchoring. No peace can stand unless buried in intention. And so the builders laid stone upon stone below the surface, a silent commitment that what is unseen is what keeps the visible strong. And here in the quiet of your mind, you are reminded of the foundations in your own life, the prayers no one heard, the struggles no one saw, the decisions made in solitude that have held you ever since. These buried moments, like the base of the pyramid, are not forgotten. They are the reason you still stand. You do not need them to be praised for them to be precious. They are enough in their silence and in their strength. Secret 23. The scale that feels like stillness. There is a paradox in the pyramid's presence. It is vast beyond imagination, yet feels still as breath, larger than anything built before or after, and yet calm, gentle, unmoved. You expect such size to feel overwhelming, to draw attention with force, to demand recognition, but instead, it humbles quietly, as though the pyramid knows how large it is and has no need to prove it. It invites awe, not by roaring, but by rest. The closer you draw to its walls, the more this paradox deepens. The stones rise above you, but they do not loom. The structure towers, but it does not threaten. Its mass is a kind of mercy, reminding you that greatness does not need noise, that strength does not require movement, that presence, when deep enough, becomes peace. And perhaps this is what true balance looks like: to carry such weight with such stillness, to embody such magnitude with such calm. The pyramid does not tremble, it does not shift, it does not ask, it simply, and in being, it teaches you that there is a kind of scale, not measured in height or length, but in peace. You too can be vast in spirit, and still in soul. You too can carry much, and remain unmoved. The pyramid does not fear its size, it surrenders to it with grace. Secret 24. The labyrinth that was meant to confuse. Inside the pyramid, there are passageways that twist and narrow, shafts that lead to stone walls, chambers with no obvious entrance, stairways that seem to descend forever into stillness. A labyrinth not meant to guide, but to disorient, not to welcome but to delay, for this too was sacred. The journey through mystery, the confrontation with uncertainty, the slow surrender of certainty for reverence. The builders did not design the pyramid to be easily understood. They designed it to be entered slowly, carefully, with the humility that comes from not knowing what lies ahead. Each corner turned, each breath drawn in those narrow spaces, forces the traveler inward, not just through the monument, but through themselves. There are no signs, there is no map, and perhaps that is the lesson, that to encounter something holy, you must be willing to lose your way, to let go of direction, to trust that the way forward may sometimes feel like wandering. That confusion is not always the enemy, it is sometimes the passage through which truth reshapes the soul. And so the pyramid becomes a kind of teacher, not of facts but of surrender. It is not a riddle to solve but a mystery to enter, not a question to answer, but a silence to follow. And if you remain long enough in its stillness, you begin to feel that getting lost was always part of being found. Secret 25. the shadow that outlives the body. Each evening, as the sun drifts behind the horizon and casts its last light against the smooth face of the pyramid, a shadow falls, not jagged or sudden, but slow, sweeping, as though the monument exhales, releasing the heat of the day into the quiet breath of dusk. And this shadow, stretching across the desert, like an ancient arm, is not simply darkness, but memory, the silent outline of a structure that still holds its shape, even when the light is gone. The body of the pyramid may seem to vanish into the dark, but its impression remains, carved not into stone, but into light itself. And long after the builders turned to dust, long after the pharaohs were forgotten by name, the shape remained, etched into the rhythm of the earth, proving that what is formed with sacred care can outlast even the light that reveals it. And here, beneath the weight of this truth, you are reminded that your shape too, the shape of your soul, the outline of your presence, the echo of your kindness, may endure even when your body cannot. But what you cast into the world, through faith, through love, through stillness, may continue to fall across time, like a shadow made not from fear but from peace. Secret 26. The whisper that rises from below. Though the pyramid towers up, though its geometry lifts the eye and spirit toward the heavens, there is a quiet truth buried beneath, a whisper that does not rise with grandeur but with gravity, soft as sand slipping through fingers, steady as the heartbeat of the buried chamber. And this whisper does not speak of gods or kings, but of the unseen effort, of the weight borne by those whose names are lost but whose labor still lives in every seam. For beneath the majesty lies the mundane, the grit, the patience, the thousand repeated movements of nameless hands, shaping stone into legacy. And it is from this hidden labor that the pyramid draws its voice, not from the peak, but from the base, not from command but from service. The whisper does not boast, it breathes. It reminds you that greatness does not rise alone, but upon the backs of humility, of stillness, of faithfulness, that asks for no reward. And now in your own stillness, you may begin to hear that same whisper, not in volume, but in truth, the gentle murmur of the unseen parts of you that have carried weight for years unnoticed, but unwavering, holding you steady without applause. This is where the pyramid speaks clearest, not from above, but from below. Secret 27. The corner that refuses to erode. Thousands of years have passed, winds have howled across the plateau, sandstorms have battered its edges, rain, rare but merciless, has kissed its surface with time, and yet, there remains a corner, untouched, precise, untouched, not by luck but by intention, a line so sharp, it defies erosion, as though the very angle had declared itself inviolable, as though the stone had made a covenant with permanence. This corner is not famous, it is not worship, but it endures, a witness to weather, a defiance of decay, not through resistance, but through purpose. Its survival is not an act of violence, but of harmony, built to meet time, not fight it. And in its endurance is a quiet lesson, that what is shaped with balance, with reverence, with right intention, does not break, it becomes timeless. You too have corners within you, places where life has carved sharp lines, where you have met the edge and stood. And perhaps you feared erosion, perhaps you feared the wearing down, but let this remind you, if you are aligned with truth, if you are shaped by something deeper than circumstance, then you will not erode, you will endure. Secret 28. The summit that was never touched by feet. As you gaze upon the highest point the pyramid once held, you must wonder, who touched it? Did any hand rest upon that final stone? Did any foot claim the summit, or was it left pure untouched? A height meant not for ownership but for awe, for in all the stories and all the studies, no clear record remains of who stood upon that pinnacle, and perhaps that is the message, that some heights are not meant to be conquered, but honored from below. The pyramid lifts the eye upward, but it does not offer a stair, it ascends not as a ladder, but as a symbol. The point at its top is not an invitation to stand, but to surrender, to let the highest part remain unreachable, untouchable, holy. It is the builder's way of saying, we go this far, and no further. The rest belongs to mystery. And in your own life, as you strive, as you rise, You must learn to recognize those heights that are not yours to hold, those places where ambition must give way to reverence, where success is not climbing higher, but knowing when to kneel. For the greatest summits are not where your feet stand, but where your spirit lifts its gaze and whispers, "This is enough." Secret 29. The equation that cannot be solved. Buried in the angles, in the weight, in the impossible precision of placement, there lies a problem that no formula has yet resolved, not because it is hidden, but because it was never meant to be solved, only known, only felt. The equation of the pyramid, the code written not in numbers alone, but in intention, intuition, reverence and surrender to something far greater than intellect can grasp. For those who have measured and calculated, who have mapped every surface and translated every proportion, still find themselves at a quiet threshold, where knowledge stops and mystery remains, where the sum does not reveal the source, and the shape does not yield its soul. Because the pyramid, like all sacred things, resists being reduced. It does not wish to be owned by understanding, but encountered through awe. And here, in the echo of this unresolved equation, you are reminded that not everything in life is meant to be explained. That love, purpose, beauty, these too contain dimensions that do not submit to logic, that open only to those who are willing to accept that some truths are deeper than reason, and some structures stand not for proof, but for presence. Secret 30. The hidden door that opens to stillness. There are tales of hidden doors within the pyramid, of secret passages sealed behind walls, of stones that shift when the light is just right, of entryways that open not to more rooms but to silence deeper than silent, chambers that echo not with sound, but with stillness, so complete it wraps the body like a robe of calm. And whether or not the door is real in stone, it is real in spirit, for there are always places in the heart where doors remain unseen until you slow down, until you stop chasing and begin listening, until the noise of the world fades just enough to let the wall breathe, and the seal give way. This hidden door does not ask for a key, it asks for quiet. It opens not through force, but through surrender, and beyond it lies not gold or treasure, but something rarer, peace that waits in the unseen, welcome that needs no voice. And tonight, perhaps that door begins to open for you, not in architecture, but in spirit, a stillness you've forgotten how to enter, now gently inviting you home. Secret 31. The harmony that refuses to rush. There is no urgency in the pyramid, no corner speaks of speed, no surface bears the signature of haste. Every element was placed with patience, shaped with care, aligned not to a deadline but to a destiny. This monument, built across decades, perhaps centuries, teaches us not how to be fast, but how to be faithful, how to move slowly enough to align each stone with heaven. In a world that rushes, that hurries and demands, the pyramid waits, unmoved, unhurried and still whole. It shows that what endures is not what is finished first, but what is finished well. It proves that harmony does not come from noise but from rhythm, from steps taken at the right time, in the right way, without fear of falling behind. And in your own breath, in your own rest tonight, let that rhythm return, the rhythm of patience, of alignment, of harmony that cannot be rushed. Let every part of you find its proper place, without pressure, without performance. You are not late, you are not behind, you are simply building, slowly, something sacred. Secret 32. The message that was never written. No carvings shout from the walls. No hieroglyphs line the interior passageways of the Great Pyramid. No painted legends mark its chamber. It is silent in the way scripture is before it is spoken. Sacred, not because it tells you what to think, but because it teaches you how to listen. And this silence is the message. This absence is the present. For in every place where words might have been, there is instead space. Space for reflection, for reverence, for breath. The pyramid does not tell you what it is. It waits for you to become still enough to ask. And even then, it answers not in voice but in shape, not in text, but in shadow. You do not need to read it. You only need to be with it, to let its silence speak louder than explanation, to let its form say what language cannot hold. And tonight, as you lie in the quiet, let your own spirit speak without words. Let the deepest part of you say nothing, and yet say everything. The pyramid remains, unwritten, unspoken, understood. Secret 33. The breath that does not rise. There are spaces within the pyramid where air does not stir, where not even the faintest draft crosses the threshold, where breath settles so completely that the very idea of movement feels foreign, not because the air is stifled, but because it is complete, whole, untouched by struggle or strain, resting like ancient dust in a stillness that remembers the beginning. These are places where time itself seems to hold its breath, where the atmosphere carries not noise or pressure, but sacred pause, as though the very act of breathing has found its destination, no longer needing to chase, to rise, to fall, only to remain. And in these chambers, a truth unfolds that cannot be measured by oxygen or pulse, a truth that says rest is not an absence of life, but its deepest expression, that to stop striving is not to die but to awaken to something even more alive, something steady and holy, something that has no name, but is known by every soul that has ever longed to be still. The pyramid teaches, not through speech, but through sensation, that breath can be more than function, it can be worship, that stillness can be more than silence, it can be sanctuary. And perhaps as you lie in the hush of your own breath, in the tender rhythm of sleep drawing near, you begin to feel that same unmoving peace, that same ancient hush, entering your spirit and holding you, without asking anything in return. Secret 34. The echo that returns without sound. Inside the heart of the pyramid, there is a kind of echo that does not come back in sound, but in weight, not a voice that bounces from wall to wall, but a presence that answers you in stillness, in the simple awareness that something hears you even if it does not reply. You can speak aloud in its corridors, call out names, whisper secrets, offer prayers, and the response is not in decibels, but in depth. It is not empty, it is listening. This kind of echo is holy. It does not interrupt, it does not entertain, it waits, unhurried, undisturbed, absorbing each word like a stone, absorbs the sun, holding it long after the moment passes, turning your voice into memory, into architecture, into something built instead of merely heard. And perhaps this is what it means to pray without words, to be known without explaining, to be received without needing to convince. The pyramid, in its silence, invites you into a conversation where only one voice speaks, and yet both hearts are heard. And in that space, the echo that does not return may be the answer you've needed all along, not in sound, but in stillness that does not leave. Secret 35. The boundary that cannot be crossed. At the edge of every sacred place lies a line, not drawn with chalk or guarded by walls, but felt deeply, unmistakably, a boundary that speaks not with warning but with reverence, saying beyond this you do not go without changing. The pyramid has such boundaries, places where light dims, where ceilings fall low, where the stone seems to breathe in rather than out, and though your feet could carry you further, your soul pauses, aware that it has arrived at something not meant to be touched, but witnessed. And this is not to exclude you, it is to protect the sanctity of encounter, to say in stone what cannot be said in speech, that holiness has depth, and depth requires humility. You do not barge into a mystery, you wait for it to welcome you, and when it does not, you bless the threshold and remain, knowing that reverence is more sacred than access. In your life too there are boundaries not born of fear but of wisdom, sacred edges where the right thing is not to push through, but to kneel, to bow, to listen from just this side of the veil. The pyramid teaches that not every chamber needs to be entered for its presence to change you. Sometimes the transformation begins at the threshold, and that is enough. Secret 36. The ceiling that touches the stars. High above the king's chamber lies a ceiling, vast, silent, heavy with weight and meaning, not only in structure but in symbolism, formed from layers of massive granite beams, stacked like shields, arranged not just to hold up stone, but to hold down the heavens themselves. For in the imagination of the ancient builders, the pyramid was not merely a tomb or a temple, it was a stairway, a model of the cosmos, a replica of divine order brought into form. And the ceiling above the king's chamber, with its layered stones and its impossible engineering, was meant not just to cover, but to connect, to stretch the mind upward, to invite the soul to remember that it too is part of something vast, to whisper that what lies above is not separate from what lies within. It is heavy, yes, but it is also holy, a weight that lifts. For here is the paradox, that a ceiling made of stone can make the soul feel lighter, that an immovable roof can lift the heart into the sky, that even beneath the burden of centuries, something in you can rise, can float, can feel the stars pressing close as if to say, you are part of this too. So, as you lie beneath your own ceiling tonight, remember this, that overhead there is not merely plaster or wood, but the echo of 1,000 years of skyward longing, that even in sleep you are reaching upward, not to escape but to return to where you began. Secret 37. The light that was never let in. There are places within the pyramid where no sun has ever entered, where no flame has flickered, where the air has known only darkness, not as absence, but as fullness, not as void but as vessel, cradling the silence like a womb cradles the unborn, sacred and shielded. These inner halls were shaped not to be seen but to be felt, not to be illuminated but to be inhabited by mystery itself, as if the builders knew that some truths do not require light to exist, they require quiet, reverent, sustained darkness in which meaning is not shown but revealed. This darkness is not the kind that frightens. It is not the kind that hides monsters or makes the spirit feel small. It is the kind that embraces, that holds without grip, that watches without eyes, and in that watching calls forth something deeper than vision, an inner sight, an awareness not of what is seen, but of what is known beyond language. The pyramid's darkness does not obscure, it sanctifies. It says you do not need to see everything to trust that everything is there. And in the stillness of your own night, as shadows gather gently around your body, as your eyelids close not to flee the world but to enter it more honestly, may you remember that even in utter darkness, there can be revelation, that even without sight, the soul sees, and what it sees is peace. Secret 38. The mirror that reflects without image. There are surfaces within the pyramid that do not gleam, that do not shine or catch the eye, stones worn soft by the passage of centuries, faces dulled, not by neglect but by purpose. For the pyramid was never built to dazzle with polish or to seduce with ornament. It was made to endure, and in its endurance, to reflect something that cannot be captured by vision, a spirit of intention, the truth of labor, the echo of what is given without being asked. And so these walls, these unreflective stones, become mirrors, not for the face but for the heart, reflecting not your image but your essence, not your outline but your presence, holding you without judging you, showing you not how you appear but what you bring. You cannot see yourself in them, but you can feel yourself in them, your longing, your quiet ache, your hunger for something that lasts. The pyramid does not ask you to admire yourself, it asks you to become part of what is true. And in the quiet reflection of stone that does not shine, you are reminded that beauty does not depend on brilliance, that what reflects the soul is often matte, and rough, and ancient, and unmoved. You are not a thing to be looked at, you are a being to be known. Secret 39. The weight that presses without crushing. In the deepest chamber, beneath the granite beams and limestone shells, you can feel it, not in your shoulders or spine, but in your chest, your breath, your awareness, the weight of the structure above you. Thousands upon thousands of tons of silent stone, resting in place, pressing, not as a burden, but as a presence, not to harm but to hold, to remind you that beneath great things, you are not destroyed but defined. The pyramid teaches that weight is not the enemy of peace, it is its companion, its womb, its necessary condition, for only where there is grounding can there be rise, only where there is depth can there be flight. The pressure of the pyramid is not violence, it is gravity with meaning. It says you are beneath something older than yourself, and yet it does not crush you, it contains you. And so in your own life, when you feel the heaviness of responsibility, of emotion, of time, remember this chamber, this sacred pressure, and know that not all weight is punishment. Some weight is purpose, Some heaviness is holy. You are not breaking. You are becoming strong enough to carry something timeless. Secret 40. The truth that cannot be moved. Though sand shifts around its base, though centuries rise and fall like waves against its edges, though empires have come and vanished, like clouds across the sky, the pyramid remains unmoved, unshaken, aligned with the stars, unbent by the storms of man or nature. Its truth is not in what it says but in how it stands, not loud, not proud, but sure, so sure that the wind itself adjusts to its form. There is a power in not moving, in being so completely rooted in purpose, that no temptation to change, to adjust, to modernize, can pull you away from what you were made to be. The pyramid does not follow trends. It does not update its shape. It does not ask whether it is understood or appreciated. It simply is. And because it is, the world must shape itself around it. And you too have truths within you that are older than fear, older than shame, older than the need to be accepted. These truths cannot be moved, though you may forget them. They wait beneath your thoughts, beneath your moods, like the base of the pyramid beneath the desert, patient, faithful, steady. You do not need to invent yourself. You need only to remember what was never lost, the part of you that does not move, that has never moved, that will remain long after the world has forgotten your name. Secret 41. The angle that points without moving. The slope of the pyramid's sides is no accident, no aesthetic guess or convenient rise, but a chosen angle drawn from the heavens, shaped with intention, held with reverence, not too steep to intimidate, not too shallow to go unnoticed, but a line that reaches upward with quiet insistence, always guiding, always lifting, always pointing beyond itself, even though it never shifts. It does not bend or adjust to gaze upon what it seeks. It simply remains still and lets the cosmos come to meet it. This angle is not about perfection in measurement. It is about constancy in direction. It teaches without voice that you do not need to run toward the stars to belong among them. You need only to incline your life in their direction, to lean your soul upward, to shape your days in alignment with what is higher than you. And by doing so you will point to heaven, even in your rest. The pyramid does not move to chase the sky, and neither must you. The right angle once formed does not demand momentum. It becomes a beacon. You too can become a stillness that points, a calm that lifts others without striving, a shape that honors the sky by simply standing. Secret 42. The chamber that was never meant for the living. Deep within the pyramid lies a room that was not designed for footsteps, not shaped for voices or the flicker of torches, not arranged to host the comings and goings of the world, but set apart, sealed, filled with air that has never been stirred by breath, a space not made for life as we know it, but for the mystery that follows, the silence that receives, the resting place where ambition ceases and eternity begins. This chamber is not empty. It is full of intention, full of reverence, full of the echoes of those who prepared it not for themselves, but for what they could not fully understand. And in that preparation, in that sacred making, they remind us that life is not the only thing worth honoring, that death too is not a mistake but a passage, not an ending but a folding into something larger, quieter, unknown but not unloved. You resting now in the quiet of your own night are not meant to fear such chambers. You are meant to recognize them, the spaces in your heart that feel untouched, unopened, seize, and to know that even these are part of the design, that even your stillness, even your surrender, has a place in the structure of things. Secret 43. The stone that was placed last, among all the millions of stones that make the pyramid, among all the weight and width and countless repetitions, there was one final block, one last offering, one ultimate seal placed, not for function but for fulfillment. A stone that did not add height or strength or dimension, but brought closure, completion, the gentle exhale of something finished not in haste, but in holiness, and no one remembers which it was. No one knows the exact moment the final hand released its burden, but the pyramid remembers, the shape remembers, for in that last stone, the structure stopped becoming and started being. It transitioned from process to presence, from task to temple, and in that moment there was peace. You too have carried stones, you have built, you have labored, you have endured, but there will come a time, not in exhaustion, but in grace, when the final stone is placed, and you will know, this is enough, not because there is no more to give, but because what has been given is whole. Let your heart feel that quiet anticipation, that peace is not the absence of effort, but the fruit of faithful completion. Secret 44, the message that waits without words. All across the surface of the pyramid, through its corridors, beneath its ceilings, beneath its timeless mass, there is no inscription declaring its purpose, no etched proclamation shouting its meaning. It waits, silent, offering itself as a question, not an answer, and in that question, in that patience, there is a message, not written in ink or carved in stone, but carried in presence, in symmetry, in weight, in stillness. It says, meaning is not always explained, sometimes it is simply lived, sometimes the deepest messages are not told, they are shown, carried, built into form, so deeply embedded in being that to behold the thing is to hear what it means. And the pyramid, this monument of mystery, this fortress of forgotten kings, speaks to you now not in history but in spirit, saying, become a message, not a performance, be something that does not need to announce itself, but that invites those who encounter you to go silent and wonder. Let your life be a structure that does not boast, but blesses. Let your present speak without needing to explain. Let your spirit be a message so clear that it requires no word. Secret 45. The silence that cannot be broken. Within the pyramid, there is a silence that does not wait for stillness to arrive, for it was there before the first breath of wind, before the hammering of tools, before even the idea of structure took root in the minds of those who would build. A silence that is not quietude but origin, a presence not lacking sound but transcending it, not empty but full in a way that human ears were never meant to measure. This silence does not tremble when footsteps approach. It does not shatter when voices rise. It remains, inviolable, as though wrapped in stone, not to be imprisoned but to be preserved. And this silence is not only within the pyramid, it is within you. It is the stillness that does not leave when your thoughts grow loud. It is the calm beneath your deepest sorrow. It is the ancient hush that whispers before you sleep, not telling you what to do, but reminding you what you are, not instructing your path, but anchoring your being. No force has ever shattered this silence. No king, no conqueror, no century of time has peeled it from the walls, for it is not tied to sound but to presence, the presence of reverence, of truth too whole to be broken. And so, tonight as your mind rests, let that silence speak, not to your ears but to your soul, where its voice has waited all along. Secret 46. The pressure that perfects without pain. Inside the architecture of the pyramid, pressure was not the enemy, but the master tool, calculated, balanced, weight distributed with such divine care that even the heaviest beams rest upon the most delicate spaces without collapse, without error, without chaos. This was no accident, no lucky guess. It was sacred geometry and understanding that true strength is not found in force, but in balance, not in defiance of gravity but in harmony with it. And so, beneath thousands of tons of stone, chambers remain still, pathways remain open. The air remains calm because pressure has found its purpose and does not need to overwhelm to support. This too is a truth meant not only for stone, but for soul, that the pressures of life, when rightly aligned, do not crush, but calibrate, do not suffocate, but sanctify. You were never made to bear the world's weight alone. You were made to carry what aligns with your calling, with strength not drawn from resistance, but from surrender to structure, surrender to divine proportion. Like the builders who knew just how to stack the unimaginable without collapse, you too can learn to order your burdens, so they become part of something unshakable. Let pressure become your teacher, not your tormentor. Let it guide you, not break you. Secret 47. The path that returns to itself. Within the winding tunnels and sloping corridors of the pyramid, one might expect to find a clear direction, an arrow pointing forward, a path marked by destination, but instead what unfolds is something deep, more contemplative, a path that does not rush toward conclusion, but loops gently into itself, that folds and doubles, that pauses without warning and leads not always to another room, but sometimes back to where you began, not because it is lost but because it is teaching. It is teaching that arrival is not always the goal, that movement is not always progress, that walking in circles may be a kind of prayer. The pyramid was not built to lead the body alone, it was built to draw the soul inward, to show that the way forward is often a spiral, a slow and sacred repetition that uncovers meaning layer by layer, breath by breath. And in your own life you may feel as though you have walked this way before, thought these thoughts again, returned to moments you thought were behind you. But perhaps this is not regression, perhaps it is revelation, perhaps the path is bringing you deeper by bringing you back, not to repeat, but to recognize. The pyramid turns inward, and so must you. There are spaces, vast and unseen, that exist not in what is built, but in what is left open, intentional absences, sacred air, voids carved into the structure, not as failures but as vessels for breath, for spirit, for the unspeakable presence that cannot be bound by surface or form. These are the places where heaven meets structure, not through embellishment, but through emptiness made holy, where nothingness becomes invitation, where the absence of form becomes the presence of meaning. The builders did not fear the void, they shaped it, they honored it, they left room for what cannot be touched. And you, in all your building, in all your hoping, must also learn to leave space, not to fill every silence with noise, not to pack every day with action, not to crowd every prayer with requests, but to carve out stillness, to welcome the room where God may dwell not in decoration, but in breath, not in volume but in nearness. The pyramid stands because of what is there, but it speaks most deeply through what is not. Let your life become the same, shaped by presence, but sanctified by space. Secret 49. The memory that cannot be measured. Beneath each stone of the pyramid, beneath the weight and the form and the gravity that binds it to the desert floor, there lies something not seen by eyes or measured by tools. A memory that is not stored in numbers or names, but in presence, in purpose, in the quiet certainty that what was built here did not begin with construction, but with remembrance, a remembering of things beyond the reach of history, a remembering of sacred alignment, of divine timing, of holy reverence passed down not by books but by breath. The pyramid remembers things no human voice has spoken in centuries, the dreams of those who gave their lives not to fame, but to form, the chants of workers singing not for reward but for rhythm, the silent intentions of those who carved with hands directed by something deeper than ambition. These memories do not fade because they were never held by time, they were held by design, sealed into the structure like incense caught in clay, rising only when one draws close enough to listen without speaking. And in the stillness of your night, you too may feel such memories stir, not from your past but from your origin, the soul's memory of why it was shaped, of what it once knew before the noise, before the questions, before the days became busy with forgetting. You were built to remember something eternal, and now in rest, that remembering begins again. Secret 50. The light that begins after the end. Though the pyramid casts long shadows, though its shape blocks the sun and shelters cool darkness within, there is a light that begins where the outer eye can no longer see, a radiance that does not shine in beams or glimmer on stone, but glows in silence, a warmth not felt by skin but by spirit, rising not from the sky but from the heart of the structure itself, from the place where presence becomes more than physical, more than visible, becomes holy. This light does not burn, it does not flicker, it is not shaped by flame or bound to the cycle of dawn and dusk. It is the kind of light that waits behind the veil, the light that greets you when all other lights fade, the light that does not chase away the dark, but fills it with peace. It is not an ending, it is a beginning disguised as stillness. And perhaps this is the great invitation to step not away from the dark, but into it, to trust that the light that matters most is the one that does not blind but blesses, that does not reveal the world outside but reveals the soul within. The pyramid knows this light, it was built to house it, and so are you. The secret 51. The breath that never leaves. Though the air within the pyramid is still, though it does not stir in gusts or shift in drafts. There is a breath that fills it, not made of oxygen or wind, but of sacred exhale, of divine presence, of the continual whisper of something unseen that once hovered over the face of the waters and now rests here, unmoved, unchanged, unending. This breath does not begin when you enter, and it does not stop when you leave. It is not confined to lungs or limited by time. It is the breath that first said, "Let there be," the breath that filled dust and made it soul, the breath that lingers in places where time is thin and space becomes sacred. It is in the halls, it is in the stone, it is in the silence between thoughts, the pause between heartbeats, the calm that enters just before sleep. You do not need to chase this breath, you need only to receive it, not with effort, but with openness, not by doing more but by surrendering more. Let the breath that never leaves become the breath that fills you now. Let it wrap your spirit in its rhythm. Let it remind you that you are held not just by hands but by presence, by peace, by promise. Secret 52. The stillness that holds the sky. High above the pyramid, the sky stretches vast and unbroken, a dome of stars that watches without blinking, without speaking, without needing to move, and yet it is held, anchored, shaped by the point of the pyramid, by the silent line that reaches upward, not to possess the sky but to meet it, to touch it with reverence, to say without words, "We belong to something higher." And the pyramid, though made of earth, though rooted in dust and sweat and labor, holds the sky not by force but by stillness. Its strength is not in reaching far, but in standing sure. It holds the heavens not like a hand clutches a flame, but like a mountain welcomes snow gently, patiently, without fear of melting, without fear of breaking. You too are made of earth, but you are shaped to hold the sky. You are built to lift your thoughts, your prayers, your longings, without needing to grasp, without needing to prove, only to open, only to stand, only to be the kind of stillness that allows the heavens to draw near. Let your soul become that point, not sharp but sacred. Let your being rise, not in haste, but in quiet certainty. The pyramid does not chase the stars, it welcomes them. So may you. Secret 53. The dust that does not forget. Across the floors of ancient chambers, in the cracks between colossal stones, layered gently on every surface untouched by modern hands, lies the dust, not the kind carried by chaos, not the careless scatter of time's decay, but a holy residue, a fine and quiet witness to every footstep, every whisper, every breath that ever dared to enter these sacred corridors. This dust is not meaningless. It is memory made visible. It is silence that has settled. It is the body of forgotten prayers, the gentle skin of vanished centuries, the soft veil that blankets what the world has ignored but heaven has never ceased to see. Each grain holds stories the stars have heard, stories of devotion, stories of grief, stories of architects who carved with trembling hands and hearts full of awe, knowing they would not live to see the work completed, but believing their dust would remain long after their names were spoken last. And so it has. The pyramid does not forget, and neither does the dust that sleeps within it. You too are covered, though you may not see it. You too carry the particles of everything sacred that has passed through you. Love given in silence, forgiveness extended in pain, faith held in darkness. Nothing you've offered is lost, not in the eyes of the eternal. You are not forgotten. You are dust that glows with glory. Secret 54. The voice that speaks without sound. There are voices that do not come from mouths, voices that are not shaped in the throat or carried on wind, voices that do not break the air, but break the soul open, voices that linger in stillness, that enter not through ears but through awareness, that do not declare but reveal. And in the pyramid, these voices live not in echo, not in noise, but in the shape of each hall, the height of each wall, the weight of every decision made in reverence and silence. The builders spoke through their arrangement of stone, through their refusal to hurry, through their placement of shadow beside light, of narrow beside wide, of stillness beneath strength. The pyramid is a voice without a body, a cry from the eternal, through the material, not screaming for attention, but waiting to be heard by the one willing to slow down long enough to listen beyond hearing. And now, as your breath softens, as your body yields to rest, you may feel that same voice begin to speak, not in answers but in presence, not in declarations but in peace, not to explain life but to remind you that it is sacred. The voice that does not sound may be the one you needed most. Secret 55. The foundation that is never seen. No one visits the base of the pyramid. No one kneels beside the buried stones, pressed so deeply into earth, they are unseen, unmoved, unknown by the millions who marvel at the structure's height and symmetry. Yet without them, nothing stands. Without them, every stone above would fall, every chamber would collapse, every wall would break apart. It is the unseen foundation, hidden beneath centuries of shifting sand, that holds everything in place. This is the kind of truth that cannot be admired from a distance. It must be felt, it must be honored, it must be understood, not with the eyes but with the heart. The kind of truth that teaches us that the most powerful forces in our lives are often the most invisible. The quiet prayers whispered before dawn, the disciplines no one applauds, the kindnesses offered without needing recognition, the forgiveness given in secret. You too have laid foundations beneath your life, truths you chose when no one was watching, faith you clung to when it hurt to believe, mercy you showed when you could have walked away. And though the world may never see it, heaven sees, and what you have built in secret will hold everything else. Secret 56. The offering that was never claimed. Legends tell of chambers still sealed, of spaces never opened, of treasures left untouched, not because they were hidden too well, but because they were never meant to be claimed. They were offerings, placed not for possession but for worship, not for hands but for heaven. Not every gift is meant to be received by men. Some are meant to be left untouched, undisturbed, complete in their giving. And deep within the pyramid, this truth rests like the air itself, quiet, unmoving, eternal, that the most sacred things are not always those we hold but those we let go of, that the holiest moments are not when we take, but when we give without expectation, when we place our love, our hope, our sorrow before the feet of the divine, not demanding return, but believing that being seen by God is enough. You too have made offerings like this, acts of love that went unnoticed, sacrifices no one thanked you for, decisions made in pain that no one understood, and yet they live, sealed within the chambers of your soul, glowing with a quiet fire that only eternity will fully reveal. Let your heart be at peace. Nothing given in love is lost, not in this world, not in the next. Secret 57. The shadow that does not threaten. When the sun descends and the long shadow of the pyramid stretches like a silent cloak over the sands, that shadow does not come to steal the light, but to carry it, to gather its golden edges, and wrap them gently around the stillness, to preserve its warmth, not in brilliance, but in memory. The shadow of the pyramid is not a warning, it is an embrace. It does not devour, it protects, and beneath it, there is no fear, only hush, only reverence, only the slow softening of the world into something holy and unseen. We have been taught to fear shadows, to see in them the absence of hope, the harbinger of loss. But here in the desert's embrace, the shadow is peace. It is the sign that something great has stood still long enough to cast its silence across the land, that something enduring enough has met the light, and not moved, not flinched, not hidden. And so the shadow becomes not a threat, but a blessing, a sign that presence remains even when sight fades. You too cast a shadow, not because you are dark, but because you have met the light. And even in your nights, even in your doubts, the outline of your faith remains, quiet and steady, resting on the world like the memory of warmth, like the trace of something divine that stood and did not fall. Secret 58. The gate that opens inward. Though no visible door greets the traveler, though no obvious threshold marks the entrance, the pyramid contains a gate, not made of hinges or locks, but of intention, of reverence, of readiness. It is a gate that does not swing outward, calling the world in, but folds gently inward, waiting for the soul to reach a depth that cannot be found by walking, only by yielding. To pass through such a gate is not to conquer, but to kneel. It is not to discover, but to remember. The pyramid does not demand credentials or strength. It asks only for stillness, the kind that lets the soul grow quiet enough to hear the stones speak, to feel the air hum with presence, to know that beyond the veil of the visible lies something so sacred, so still, that only humility may enter. And within your own heart, such a gate waits. It is not made of words. It is not bound by time. It is opened only by surrender, not to weakness, but to wonder, not to emptiness, but to the fullness that comes when you lay down the weight of needing to be more and step through with nothing but your breath and your silence, and your willingness to be known. Secret 59. The stone that waited for you. Among the countless stones placed by hands long forgotten, among the millions lifted, carved, stacked, and set with precise intention, there is one stone perhaps ordinary in size, unremarkable in texture, unnoticed by eyes that only scan for greatness, and yet it is the one that now sits beneath your spirit, the one that carries your rest, the one that waited for you to arrive. It did not ask for fame. It did not seek the peace. It simply waited, holding its place, faithful in function, sacred in stillness, knowing that someday a soul would come not to admire but to dwell, not to analyze but to listen. And now as you lie in rest, as the world falls silent and the night wraps its fingers gently around your thoughts, this stone holds you not out of obligation, but out of design. You were not too late. You were not forgotten. The place beneath you was prepared long before you arrived, and it welcomes you without judgment, without demand. Like the stones that have endured centuries of wind and time and shifting sand, it simply remains unshaken, unfailing, waiting for the moment when rest would find you, and you would remember that even in the vastness of mystery, you have a place. Secret 60. The ending that never ends. In every story, there comes a final word, a last moment, a final breath, a closing of the scroll. But the pyramid does not end. It does not tell a tale with a neat conclusion, does not give you a final phrase to carry away like a souvenir. Instead, it simply remains, and in that remaining, it continues to speak, not in sentences but in presence, not in chapters but in weight, in shadow, in silence that keeps unfolding long after you've walked away. And this perhaps is its greatest mystery, that it does not try to complete the story, only to hold it, to cradle it across centuries, to allow each visitor to become part of its unfinished echo. It says not the end but still, not goodbye but return when you are ready. It is not a monument to closure, it is a sanctuary of continuation, and your own life, though filled with moments that feel like conclusions, like loss, like endings too heavy to bear, is still unfolding. Nothing sacred is ever truly finished. No truth is ever fully silenced. No soul is ever completely forgotten. You are part of something vast. You are part of something still being written. Even now, even in rest, the story continues. Secret 61. The ceiling that does not collapse. Far above the quiet chambers where no echo dares disturb the air, above the sarcophagus of stone and the floor that has cradled centuries of sleep, the ceiling rests wide, thick, deliberate, a weight that should by all logic crush what lies beneath. And yet it does not falter, it does not fracture, it does not fall. It remains, exactly as it was placed, layer upon layer, beam upon beam, like fingers of stone stacked across the heavens, holding not merely a roof above a room, but the very faith of the builders in something greater than themselves. In the idea that what is heavy can still protect, that what is massive can still be gentle, that what looms overhead need not be feared if it is set in place with wisdom and reverence. And perhaps this ceiling is not only above the tomb of kings, but above you, not in plaster or timber, but in the invisible burdens you have carried, the responsibilities you have not spoken aloud, the fears you dared not confess, and yet here you are beneath it all, uncrushed, alive, even still, breathing beneath the vast weight of all you hold, not because you are unafraid, but because something deeper in you knows how to bear what must be borne without breaking. The pyramid reminds us that ceilings do not exist to trap us, but to teach us that strength can exist above us without pressing us down, that peace can reign even when weight is present, that our shelter may be heavy but it is still holy. Secret 62. The measure that was never wrong. Every stone within the pyramid was shaped not by guessing, not by impulse or haste, but by the mathematics of meaning, by lengths measured with cords of woven fiber, by angles drawn beneath starlit sky, by minds who believed that beauty was not a matter of luxury but of alignment, who believed that to get even one measure wrong was not simply an error, but a dishonor to the eternal. And so they measured again and again, not to impress but to remain faithful, not to chase perfection, but to stand as close to truth as human hands could reach. And though thousands of years have passed, and the tools have turned to dust, the alignment still remains, the proportions still echo with the calm of intentionality, the golden ratio hidden in the stones like music you can't hear but somehow feel. You walk beside them and something in you straightens. You stand within them and something in you listens. For the body knows when it stands in the presence of harmony, and the soul knows when it is surrounded by what was made with care. You too were measured, not in inches, not in days or failings, but in wonder, in divine design, in purpose carved into the shape of your breath. You were not made in error, your length is known, your life has been aligned with love. Nothing is out of place, even when you cannot see the plan. You are held within the measurements of something far greater than you, and nothing in you is accidental. Secret 63. The hollow that holds the infinite. Deep within the pyramid, there is a shaft, not a hallway, not a door, not a tunnel to be walked, but a narrow vertical channel, cut so precisely, angled so deliberately, that it reaches toward the stars with intention, as if even the deepest chamber must have a line drawn outward, a breath of space that says, even in death, we are not closed off, even in stillness we look up. This shaft leads not to escape, but to remembrance. It is not an exit but a connection, a line of invisible conversation between what is buried and what is boundless. And though it is small, barely wider than a hand, it speaks loudly. It says that space is never truly sealed when the spirit seeks the sky, that light may not fill the room, but hope can still find its way through the narrowest crack, through the smallest invitation. The builders knew that the soul, even when resting, must not be trapped, that it must be offered the dignity of looking beyond. You too have such shafts within you, tiny openings that may feel insignificant, but which pierce the ceiling of despair, which draw light into sorrow, which aim your silent prayers into the endless night, not to be answered quickly but to be heard eternally. Even your smallest longing reaches the stars, even your narrowest hope is enough to hold the infinite. Secret 64. The sand that refuses to swallow. All around the pyramid, the desert shifts, dunes rise and fall, wind carves valleys in what was once flat, storms howl and scatter the fragile lines drawn by man, and yet the pyramid remains, not untouched but unmoved. It does not resist the sand, it receives it, it allows it to gather, to climb, to press against its walls, to kiss its stones with restless grain, and still it stands not buried, not erased but grounded. For though the sand is endless, the pyramid is rooted deeper still. Its base goes down further than the eyes can see, and so the dust may swirl but it cannot claim. This is how endurance looks, not by avoiding the storm, not by staying spotless or untouched, but by remaining when everything around you changes. The sand may come, the wind may howl, the years may blow bitter truths against your sides, but you are not made to sink. You are not shaped to disappear. You are deeper than the dust. You are older than the wind. The pyramid does not fear the desert, for it was born from, and you do not need to fear your season, your struggle, your silence, for beneath your visible self, there is a foundation built by God, sunk deep in grace, unmoved by time, untouchable by chaos. You are still standing, and you will not be swallowed. Secret 65. The echo that was never meant to return. Within the pyramid's inner sanctums, where sound seems to vanish before it reaches the wall, where breath feels suspended as though held in reverence, there lives an echo unlike the echoes of the world, not one that bounces, that shouts itself back in hollow repetition, but one that surrenders, that bows low, that offers your voice to the silence, and does not demand it be returned. In this space, the air becomes sacred, because it listens so deeply that even your thoughts quiet themselves, even your fears lose their sharpness, even your past feels far away. Not in forgetting, but in peace. You do not hear yourself in these halls because they were never meant for performance. They were meant for presence. They were meant for presence. They were carved not for the ego to be amplified, but for the soul to be calmed. And in this, there is a lesson, so gentle, it could be missed, yet so eternal, it changes everything, that not every voice needs to be echoed, not every prayer requires a sign, not every offering demands applause. Some words are made to be given away, left on the altar of stone, and time, as smoke rises unseen but not unnoticed. And so tonight, as you rest, as you let go of needing answers, or proof, or anything returned to you in kind, may you be reminded that sometimes the truest echo is the one that never comes back, because it has been received by something infinite, something holy, something that holds all things. Secret 66. The geometry that guides without explaining. All throughout the structure, angles and alignments appear again and again. The golden triangle, the perfect squares, the sacred slopes that match the stars, and though modern eyes measure them with tools and charts, those who built them trusted more than mathematics. They believed that if the structure could reflect the heavens, then heaven would inhabit the structure, that if the walls obeyed the rhythm of creation, then creation itself would rest within its breath. They did not explain what they knew, they simply built it into the very shape. And now, standing inside it, or simply beholding it from afar, something in you aligns too, not because you understand every calculation, but because your spirit was made to recognize what is true. The body relaxes where proportion is right. The heart softens where balance is honored. The soul opens when geometry gives way to glory. So do not be discouraged when you do not understand the design of your days. Do not despair when the lines of your life seem sharp, or strange, or unclear. You are being shaped in sacred geometry by hands that see what you do not, by wisdom that measures in eternity. You are being aligned with something higher. You are part of a structure that does not need to explain itself to be true. Secret 67. The ladder that rises without steps. Somewhere in the depths of the pyramid's inner mystery, beyond where the tourists walk and the torches reach, there is a concept, more ancient than the stones, more silent than the hallways, of ascent not by stairs, not by ladder or rope, but by inner elevation. The builders knew that not all climbing requires motion, that not all rising is. There are ascents that occur within, where the soul grows taller, while the body remains still, where wisdom grows louder though the mouth stays closed, where you reach the heights of understanding without ever leaving your knee. The pyramid was never designed as a monument to achievement, but a metaphor for ascent. Its peak is not a platform for pride, but a symbol of completion, of quiet victory, of drawing nearer to the divine without striving. And this is your invitation too, to rise, not by rushing, but by releasing, to grow not by gripping, but by grounding yourself in presence, in humility, in the slow sacred work of becoming. Let your spirit rise tonight, not in effort, but in surrender. Let your soul climb the invisible ladder, carved into stillness. Let your rest be your elevation. Secret 68. The compass that points without moving. Buried deep in the earth, wrapped in layers of stone, yet pointing to the stars with unwavering conviction. The pyramid stands as a compass, not in motion, not in spinning needle or magnetic pull, but in the stillness of perfect alignment. Each of its sides faces the cardinal directions, with a precision that time has not erased. Without battery, without update, without recalibration, it points not to show the way forward, but to remind you that the way is always true, when the foundation is set in truth. This compass does not change. It does not need to chase the north. It already knows where north is, and so it teaches us that orientation is not found in movement, but in memory. Memory of the stars, memory of the source, memory of what is eternal and unmoved. You do not need to spin to find direction. You do not need to rush to discover your path. You only need to be still enough to let the true lines of your life reveal themselves. Let your soul become a compass, not by motion, but by meaning. Let your being face what is holy, and the rest will follow. Secret 69. The line that connects earth to heaven. There is a hidden line that rises from the base of the pyramid through its pointed crown, a vertical whisper made not of stone but of intention, of sacred direction, of the builder's silent cry to the heavens above. It is not a visible rope or ladder, but it binds the structure to the sky like an invisible vow, not made with words but with alignment, not declared aloud but obeyed with every block laid in faith, with every decision made by eyes that gazed far beyond the horizon, and saw not merely stars but order, and in that order, invitation. This line is not measured by meters or meters alone. It is measured by the stillness that rises within you when you align with something higher, when your soul straightens itself to face the divine, when you remember that your life, like the structure that has stood for centuries, was made to point, not to self, but to God. You do not need to rise in height to rise in spirit. You need only to live with the same unbroken verticality, grounded in truth, lifted by faith, crowned in reverence. And though no one can see the line with their eyes, those who draw near feel it. They feel something calling upward, something steady and sure, something that says the highest point of your life may be the one where you no longer chase the sky, but stand aligned with it. Secret 70. The floor that was built to carry forever. Beneath your feet, beneath the layers of dust and time, beneath the stones worn smooth by centuries of silence, there is a floor that does not groan under pressure, does not yield to age, does not crack beneath the weight of memory or sorrow or loss. It holds everything, not because it is unfeeling, but because it is unfailing. This floor, wide and deliberate, was made not just to carry kings or coffins, but to carry stillness, to carry reverence, to carry the presence of the eternal. As it pressed itself gently into time, this floor does not judge what steps upon it. It simply holds. It does not choose who may enter. It simply remains. It is the faithful servant of the structure, the silent bearer of stories too deep for books, of prayers too ancient for voices. And so it teaches us that strength is not always in walls or towers or victory. Sometimes it is in what you cannot see, in what you trust beneath you, in the ground that does not move, in the faith that does not fracture. And you too have such a floor, in the deepest part of you, beneath the noise and striving and fear, a holy base laid down before you were born, made not of stone but of spirit, designed to carry your days, your nights, your quiet ache for peace. You are not falling, you are held. Secret 71. The wind that cannot be trapped. Though the pyramid is sealed in places, closed to light and locked to sound, though its doors are thick and its passageways narrow, there is still wind, not the rushing kind that bends trees or shouts across desert, but the kind that whispers through cracks too fine to see, that finds its way into corners untouched by time, that moves not with violence but with persistence, not to disturb but to remind. The builders knew that even in tombs, breath must be allowed, even in silence, air must move, even in stillness, something must live, and so they left just enough space, just enough room for wind to enter, for spirit to pass, for life to hum quietly beneath the stones. They knew the power of a breath that could not be locked out, the presence that could not be sealed in, and in this there is a sacred truth. What is meant to move cannot be caged. What is spirit cannot be owned. What is eternal cannot be ended. You too carry such wind. There is a breath in you that does not end when life grows heavy. There is a spirit in you that finds its way through the smallest opening, that moves, not to escape but to remind you that you are more than what you carry. You are more than what confines you. Let the wind pass through you now. Let it lift what cannot stay. Let it remain where all else fades. Secret 72. The name that no one speaks. Hidden deep within the foundation, buried beneath layers of silence and stone, there is a name, not carved, not written, not spoken, a name never chiseled onto walls, nor recorded in scrolls, a name that the pyramid carries not on its face but in its spirit. This is not the name of a king or a priest or a scribe. It is the name of the one who sees when no one else looks, who remembers when time forgets, who holds when hands grow tired. It is the name that was present before the first stone was placed, and it is the name that will remain when all stones return to dust. This name does not need to be known to be true. It does not fade in silence. It does not tremble beneath time. It watches, it blesses, it waits. And perhaps in the quiet you have heard it too, not with your ears but with the deep part of you that recognizes love, not as a feeling, but as a presence that remains. You do not need to say this name aloud. It has already been written across your soul, and so the pyramid holds the name. And so do you, not because you earned it, but because it was spoken over you before you breathed, because it was whispered when you were formed, because it lives even now as you rest, wrapped in the quiet warmth of night, held by something that does not need to be named to be near. Secret 73. The chamber where time forgot to count. In the heart of the pyramid, past the passageways carved with intention, past the slopes where footsteps fade into silence, there rests a chamber not marked by time but by presence. A space neither large nor small, neither grand nor plain, and yet its very stillness holds more meaning than monuments built for spectacle. There, in that hidden core, the air stands thick with memory and yet untouched by change. For within those stone-wrapped walls, time itself dares not intrude, and the ticking of ages grows still, as if the very seconds bow to the eternity embedded in the structure's bones. This room, this still place, was not built to impress the world outside. It was built to welcome something deeper, a resting of the soul in the middle of all striving, a meeting of the unseen with the form that carries it, a holy pause where breath is not rushed and thought is not pursued, where all that matters is the weight of what you carry and the hands that are now willing to let it go. You step into this place not as a seeker of facts, but as one tired of questions, one ready to stop measuring life by progress, and instead begin to feel the sacredness of simply being. You too have such a chamber within you, not known by your words, not found by your strength, but waiting in the deepest fold of your spirit. It is the part of you that does not count the days you've wasted or the years you've wandered. It welcomes you now, unburdened, unseen, untouched by guilt or expectation. Let yourself rest there tonight. Time will wait. Secret 74. The silence that sings in stone. The pyramid is silent, not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something too holy to speak. It is a silence that wraps around the soul, like linen wraps the body, a silence that protects what words cannot hold, that preserves the sacred from being wasted on noise. In this silence there is music, not of instruments or voices, but of alignment, of balance, of chambers built so perfectly that even the stillness hums with intention. When you enter that silence, something in you listens differently, not with your ears, but with your being. You begin to notice the soft rhythm of your breath as a sacred melody, the beat of your heart as a drum too ancient to have been taught. The pyramid sings, not in notes, but in presence, and your soul joins the choir simply by being still long enough to feel it. You do not need to compose a response. You do not need to perform or achieve. You only need to let yourself sink into the music of silence, to hear what has always been speaking, even when your world was too loud to notice. The silence of the pyramid is not empty, it is full, and so is the quiet waiting for you now. Secret 75. The message written without ink. No script adorns the inner walls. No carvings line the chamber's surface. No hieroglyphs tell tales in stone. And yet there is a message here, louder than symbols, more eternal than any scroll. A truth, not etched with chisel but with alignment, with design, with the way every passage breathes direction into the feet of those who walk it. The pyramid speaks in shape. It instructs by stillness. It teaches without a single word. This message is not hidden, only quiet. It waits for those who listen with the whole body, for those who walk not to learn, but to remember. It says, you were made with care. You were built in intention. You are not an accident of matter or motion. You are form and spirit, balance and breath, structure and mystery. You are more than what the world calls you. You are a temple, and though no one will ever find this truth written on a wall, those who dwell long enough in its silence will carry it away etched in the bones of their soul, and so will you, not because you tried to understand, but because you were willing to receive. The pyramid does not require your study, it welcomes your surrender. Secret 76. The presence that needs no witness. There is something holy that rests in the pyramid even when no eyes see it, even when the dust has settled undisturbed for centuries, even when darkness wraps every chamber, and no voice has echoed for generations. A presence that does not wait to be admired, that does not need applause or affirmation, that remains not because it is observed but because it is eternal. This presence is not conjured, it does not come and go, it simply is. Perhaps this is what makes the pyramid holy, not its size or age or beauty, but its unwavering witness to the reality that sacredness is not dependent on our awareness. The presence of God does not depend on your recognition. It was there before you entered, and it will be there when you leave. It does not require your understanding to remain true. It does not need your striving to stay close. And so tonight you are free, free to rest, free to let go of the fear that you must do something to deserve peace. The presence is already near. It is not waiting for you to be perfect. It is waiting for you to be still. You do not need to summon it. You only need to notice. You are not alone. You never were. Secret 77. The flame that never touched the walls. Though no torch burns within the sealed chambers, and no candle ever dared dance near the sacred walls, there is a fire that lives inside the pyramid, though unseen, not made of heat, or smoke, or light, but of something older, something quieter, something eternal. This fire does not consume, it does not flicker, it does not draw eyes to itself. It rests like a breath just taken, like a promise just made, like a soul that has not forgotten who it is. The builders felt it as they worked, though they never spoke its name. The priests knew it when they laid down their silence beside the cold stone. This fire is not of earth, it is of presence. It does not burn wood, it burns through illusion. It is the fire that lives in spaces not for destruction, but for illumination, the light that reveals, without glare, the warmth that calms without scorching. And you too carry such a fire, not on your tongue, but deep within, the glowing truth that you were born of light, formed in the quiet furnace of divine intention, and that even in the chill of night, even in the dark silence of your resting hours, something in you glows, something in you remains lit, something in you will never go out. Some fall inward, downward, toward places where the earth seems to breathe more slowly, where the air thickens with mystery, where gravity becomes not a force but a calling. These are not stairs for escaping, they are stairs for returning, not to the past but to the deepest part of now. They do not lead to tombs, though bones may sleep beside them. They lead to truth, the kind that only grows in the dark, the kind that only speaks when all other voices fall silent. The descent is not punishment, it is invitation. To walk these stairs is to step away from the brightness that blinds, and into the darkness that sees. It is to feel your own breath more clearly, to hear the slow rhythm of your being, to come face to face with the part of you that does not shout, that does not perform but simply is. And at the bottom, there is no door, no answer, no ending, only stillness. This is where the soul remembers that it was never meant to live at the surface. This is where you can rest, not because you have reached the bottom, but because you have stopped needing to rise. The stair that leads down is not the stair of failure, it is the stair of wisdom, and in your descent you may finally find peace. Secret 79. The light that has no source. Some say a soft glow lingers in certain chambers, though no flame feeds it, no sun touches it, no lamp dares to reach. They say the air seems clearer there, as if the molecules themselves remember light, as if the very dust shimmers with something beyond the physical. But this glow is not for the eyes, it is for the soul. It is not the kind of light you can photograph or describe. It is the kind that rises inside you when you are still long enough to notice that even in darkness, you are not blind. The pyramid teaches that not all light must be seen to be real. Some light is known only in the bones, only in the silence, only in the peace that wraps you like the arms of someone who never left. You do not need to find the source, You only need to trust the present. For the light that matters most does not arrive from above or beside. It awakens from within, slow and sacred, and now, as you lie in the stillness of your night, with no lamp burning beside you, you may feel that same light rising in you, not to dazzle, not to disturb, but to remind you that you are not lost, that you have always carried this brightness, even when you could not name it, even when you forgot it was there, it never forgot you. Some were hidden before the next layer was added, buried before the structure even rose above the sand, forgotten by the time the top was touched. These are the stones no tourist will photograph, no scholar will praise, and yet without them, the pyramid would fall. Without them, nothing would hold. And so the builders honored them with silence. They did not mark them, they did not glorify them, they simply laid them down with care, with reverence, knowing that sacredness is not found in applause but in purpose, that the deepest strength comes not from what is visible, but from what remains faithful even when no one sees. You too have such stones in your life, decisions made in quiet, love given in secret, forgiveness offered without thanks. These are your buried foundations, the parts of you that no one may ever notice, but which God sees clearly. And tonight, as you rest, you do not need to be seen to be valuable. You do not need to be praised to be strong. You have been laid in purpose, and everything above you, all that your life holds, stands because you remain. Secret 81. The stillness that outlasts the storm. In the long memory of stone, the pyramid has stood through sandstorms that turned the sky black, through rains that carved rivers into desert dust, through winds that screamed like ghosts of fallen empires. And yet through it all, the pyramid remained, not untouched, but unshaken, not protected but preserved by its own stillness, not resisting the storm in violence, but absorbing it in quiet strength. There is no fear in its walls, no trembling in its weight, only the patient annons of a presence that does not chase the storm away, but waits for it to pass. And so it teaches us that peace is not the absence of struggle, but the choice to remain grounded within it, that security does not come from sealing every door, but from knowing that what is within cannot be broken by what howls without. It is not noise that defines your safety, it is your willingness to be still while the world shakes. You too have weathered storms, some that others never saw, some that passed quietly through your soul and left no visible damage, but changed you just the same. And now, as you lie and rest, you do not need to fight the wind. You do not need to outrun the dark. You only need to remain. Like the pyramid, you were built to endure, not by resisting what comes, but by becoming the stillness that cannot be moved. Secret 82. The path that walks through mystery. The pyramid offers no map. Its passageways bend unexpectedly. Its chambers sit in silence without explanation. Its shadows fall on walls untouched by time. And to walk within it is not to find certainty, but to surrender to mystery. Each step becomes a question. Each pause becomes a prayer. You do not walk to reach a goal, but to remember the wonder of not knowing, to be drawn not by the promise of answers, but by the beauty of presence. The path inside is not meant to be efficient, it is meant to transform. The journey through stone is slow, deliberate, sacred. The air grows thicker, the light more rare, and you find yourself face to face not with understanding, but with awe. For the pyramid does not teach in explanations, it teaches in silence. And in that silence, something begins to shift in you. You begin to see that life is not a puzzle to solve, but a mystery to walk. That your purpose is not to figure everything out, but to keep moving in reverence. And now, in your rest, you walk still, not in your feet, but in your spirit, guided not by sight, but by trust. You do not need a map. You have been invited into the mystery. Secret 83. The room where nothing needs to happen. At the very center, past every corner turned, past every slope descended, there is a room where nothing is expected, where no relic waits on a pedestal, where no inscription screams to be read, only air, only stone, only presence. This room was not built for performance, it was not carved for spectacle, it was made for rest, a place where the body can stop striving, where the soul can lie down without demand, where time folds itself into quiet and ambition forgets its name. In this sacred emptiness, The pyramid becomes a mirror. It shows you what remains when everything else is removed. It shows you that your worth was never in your effort, that your being is holy, even when you do nothing, even when you say nothing, even when you are simply still. And now, as you lie in your own quiet space, may that same spirit cover you, the permission to rest, without guilt, the grace to stop without apology. You are in the sacred room now. You do not need to fix anything. You do not need to prove anything. You are already enough. Secret 84. The presence that watches without judgment. Some say the pyramid watches, not with eyes, not with cameras or guards, but with a kind of sacred awareness, as though the stones themselves remember every footstep, as though the air itself holds witness to every breath drawn in reverence. And yet this watching is not a gaze of condemnation. It does not measure or record your failures. It does not hold scales in its hand. It watches with love, with the calm seeing of something that knows its own purpose and knows yours too. It does not compare. It does not rush. It simply remains, and in its remaining, it sees. And what it sees is not your mistake, but your meaning, not your effort, but your not your confusion, but your sacredness. You are not being judged as you lie here in stillness. You are being held, not by the pyramid's walls, but by the presence that designed them, the presence that watches not to catch you in fault, but to remind you that you are never alone. You are not under surveillance. You are under care. And even now, even here, even in silence, you are seen, not with scrutiny, but with love. Secret 85. The void that holds all things. Within the pyramid, there are chambers that remain empty, not because they lack meaning, but because they were created to cradle the invisible. Spaces left untouched by decoration, left blank by design, unclaimed by tomb or treasure, yet more powerful than gold or glory. These rooms were formed to remind the soul that not everything sacred can be seen, not every truth is written in symbols, and that emptiness is not always absence, but invitation. In a world that fills every silence with sound, and every corner with clutter, the pyramid dares to make space, to welcome stillness, to embrace the vast hush, where presence dwells more fully than speech ever could. And within that void, the spirit finds rest, not from retreating, but from returning to the core, to the breath, to the calm that speaks with no voice and calms without effort. So too in your life, there are empty places, days where nothing seems to bloom, seasons where light feels far, stretches of time where the purpose is unclear, and yet these are not wasted, these are not hollow, they are sacred rooms made for the unseen. And even now, even in silence, you are being held by a void that is not lacking but full, full of peace, full of promise, full of the presence that fills all things without needing to be seen. Secret 86. The foundation buried beneath the sand. Beneath the base of the pyramid, deeper than what eyes can reach or hands can dig, lies a foundation so massive, so quiet, so steady, that every stone above rests upon it without doubt. It does not appear in painting. It is not honored in speech. Yet if it were not there, all would fall. This foundation was not built to be admired. It was built to endure, laid block by block before even the first visible wall took form, driven deep into earth, anchored not in pride but in promise. And though time has covered it, and sand has swallowed its edges, it remains unmoved, undeterred, unconcerned with glory, because it knows its purpose. And this is the quiet power of a life lived in depth. Not every truth is seen, not every strength is recognized, but what is hidden may still be holy. What is unseen may still be the very thing holding everything else in place. So it is with you. Beneath your surface, beneath your daily motion, your spoken words, your visible accomplishments, there is a foundation laid by God, deeper than doubt, stronger than fear, older than memory. It does not need applause. It only needs faith. And tonight as you lie still, let your soul remember what your body forgets, that even when you feel weak, you are being held by something that does not shake. Secret 87. The shadow that teaches light. The pyramid casts a shadow across the sand, long and sharp, uncertain, not a mistake, not a flaw, but a mirror to the light that reveals it. Without the shadow, the sun's shape cannot be known. Without the darkness it draws, the brilliance it reflects would go unrecognized. The shadow does not compete with the light, it completes it. And in this sacred dance between shine and shade, the pyramid reminds us that darkness is not the enemy of light, but its canvas, its contrast, its echo. The ancients did not fear the shadow, they honored it. They followed it to mark time, to tell the truth of the sun's path, to measure the presence of what could not be touched. The shadow was not a curse, it was a teacher. And so it is in your life. The places you hide, the sorrows you carry, the nights that seem too long, they are not proof of your failure. They are the signs of your light. They show where you stand. They reveal what you've survived. You are not broken because you cast a shadow. You are whole. And every dark outline that follows you is proof that light has already found you. Secret 88. The voice that speaks without sound. There is a voice that lives in the pyramid, not a whisper you hear with your ears, not a chant or a song, but something deep, something that trembles in the bones when you stand within the stillness, something that fills the air, not with volume, but with knowing. It does not command, it does not demand, it simply is, a presence made audible by silence, a truth made real by breath. Those who have stood within its shadow often say they felt something, not chills, not fear but reverence, as though the air itself had memory, as though the stone had something to say and had been waiting quietly for centuries for someone willing to listen, without interrupting. This is the kind of voice that does not argue or persuade, it just remains, and by its very staying it changes everything. You have known such a voice too, the one that rises when the noise finally stops, the one that comforts without words, the one that tells you that you are not lost, not abandoned, not beyond repair. It does not shout, it does not explain, but it is always there, in your stillness, in your sleep, in the quiet moments where breath and peace become the same thing. And now, as you rest, let that voice fill you again, not with answers but with peace, not with certainty but with presence. You do not need to hear it to be changed by it, you only need to be still. Secret 89. The memory that does not fade. The walls of the pyramid do not speak in voices, yet they remember every footstep that has echoed in their chambers, every prayer whispered into the still air, every tear fallen quietly where no witness stood. They are not blank, though they bear no words, and they are not deaf, though no ears rest within them, for the memory they carry is not one of detail but of essence, not of events but of presence, not of what happened, but of what mattered. Stone does not forget when it is laid in love. Air does not forget when it is shared with reverence. And so the pyramid remembers, not to judge, not to keep score, but to hold sacred what passed through its silence. And in this memory, something of you lives, something deeper than your name, something older than your story, something eternal. You too carry memory in your soul, not always in images or dates, but in the way your spirit shifts when it nears the holy, in the way your heart pauses when you touch something that cannot be explained, the presence that met you in pain, the peace that found you in surrender. These moments do not fade, even when the mind forgets. The pyramid teaches that memory is not only what you keep, it is what keeps you, that coats the corners and rests on forgotten ledges, is not the product of decay, but of time's reverence. It is not filth, not something to be swept away in shame, but the residue of sacred stillness, the quiet offering of century, the ash of presence that has touched down again and again without asking to be seen. This dust holds story, not the grand ones carved in monuments or sung by scribes, but the small stories, the breath of one who stood in silence, the footprint of one who knelt alone, the soft imprint of a prayer never spoken aloud. And though the world sees dust as waste, the pyramid sees it as witness. So too in your life, the small things you've left behind, the pieces of yourself you thought were lost, the days that seemed to vanish into the mundane, none of it was wasted, none of it forgotten. Even the dust of your journey holds value. Even the smallest trace of your presence is part of something sacred. Let yourself be at peace with what you cannot polish. Let the dust settle, not as failure, but as a sign that you were here, that you mattered, that something holy passed through. Secret 91, the stone that carries breath. At the heart of the pyramid, beneath the layers of immovable strength, within the hardness that has defied centuries of wind and war, there is a secret that softens everything, the knowledge that even stone, when carved with reverence, carries breath, not the breath of lungs or motion, but the breath of meaning, of purpose, of presence woven into every grain by hands that knew they were building more than shelter. They were shaping a space where heaven might touch earth. This is not breath as in exhale or inhale. It is breath as in spirit, the animating force that gives stillness its weight, that gives silence its depth, that gives stone its soul. The pyramid lives not because it moves, but because it holds something that never died, and so do you. Beneath your defenses, beneath the walls you built to survive, beneath the stillness others mistake for distance, there is breath, there is life that has not been extinguished, there is presence that does not fade. You carry the breath of something eternal, not because you earned it, but because you were made for it. Even as you sleep, that breath moves through you, quiet, sure, unceasing. Let it carry you now. Secret 92, the room that was never found. There are whispers among those who study the pyramid, rumors of a chamber still undiscovered, a room sealed so perfectly that no sound has touched it, no light has entered it, no hand has disturbed its rest. They search for it not to claim it, but to behold it, because even the idea of its presence changes the air, even the possibility of such untouched space awakens something reverent in the heart. And though this room may never be found by tools or maps, the pyramid holds it, not as a prize but as a promise, that some mysteries are meant to remain whole, that not every secret must be solved, that some spaces are sacred precisely because they are hidden. You too have such a room, deep within, untouched by failure, unmoved by time, unbroken by sorrow. It is the part of you God never gave away, the part no one could ruin, the chamber of the soul that still waits in peace. You do not need to unlock it. You do not need to explain it. You only need to know that it is there, and tonight as you rest, let the knowledge of that holy hidden room comfort you, the truth that within you lies something never lost, something always waiting, something sacred beyond discovery. Secret 93, the echo that was waiting to return. Within the chambers of the pyramid, where sound dares not rush, and even the whisper of movement becomes sacred, there lives an echo that does not ring loud or fast, but returns like a memory long delayed, not because it was forgotten, but because the silence waited long enough for it to find the right shape. It is not the echo of a voice that filled the space, but of presence itself, of reverence allowed to linger in the air until stillness gave it permission to answer. And so, when you breathe there even without speaking, the air begins to carry something back to you, not a replica of what you gave, but a deeper tone, a fuller note, the sound of something true being returned in the language of eternity. The pyramid teaches us that even silence listens, and that when you wait without forcing, the things you thought had vanished might find their way back to you in forms more honest than when they left. So it is with your own prayers, your quiet longings, the confessions made in the heart, where no human ear was present. They have not disappeared. They echo now in time, returning not with noise but with peace. You need not cry louder, you need only be still. The echo knows where to find you. Secret 94, the passage that opens only at night. There is a belief old as the stones themselves, that certain pathways within the pyramid reveal themselves only in the dark, that there are turns and openings, narrow and hidden, which cannot be seen by the light of the sun but emerge like truth in dreams, when everything else has grown quiet. These are not places the day can show you, for they are reserved for the wisdom that waits in rest, the knowledge that dawn does not deliver. The ancients knew that sleep is not the end of thought, but the beginning of deeper seeing, and so the pyramid became not just a monument to life, but a guide into the mysteries that unfold when the body grows still, and the soul begins to move. At night, the chambers seem to breathe differently. The walls hum not with history, but with promise, and those who enter do not find a way out, they find a way in. So too in your own night, as you lay down your thoughts and release the burdens of the day, you may find paths opening in your spirit that were not visible in the noise. These are not dreams born of chaos, they are visions born of presence. Let yourself walk them gently, do not fear what comes in darkness. Some truths only arrive when the lights are off. Secret 95. The ceiling that was measured by the stars, above the inner sanctum, beyond the reach of hands and yet placed by human vision. The stones of the ceiling were aligned not with guesswork but with the sky, each one resting in angles that echo the constellations, as though the builders understood that what happens on earth must reflect what lives above it, that heaven and stone were never meant to be strangers. This ceiling was not designed to contain, it was built to point, to direct the soul upward even as the feet stood still. It is not flat, this ceiling, nor dull, nor it is the map of longing, the architecture of worship, a silent sermon in limestone that says look higher, even when all else pulls the gaze down. And though no stars shine in the tomb, the ceiling remembers them. It carries their memory like a blessing sealed in weight and one, and so must you, for within your life there are ceilings that seem to press down, but were actually placed to lift your eyes, to remind you that your existence is not confined to what surrounds you now, but drawn toward what calls you beyond it. You were not made to be buried, you were made to be directed, not to escape the earth, but to let heaven rise within it. Even now as you rest, your soul lifts upward. Secret 96. The door that was sealed for peace. One day after the last stone was placed, after the final word was spoken, after the last hand withdrew and the workers faded into history, there came the moment when the door was sealed, not in fear, not in haste, not to trap, but to complete. It was closed with reverence, not to keep something in, but to preserve what had already entered. The ceiling of the pyramid was never meant to silence it. It was meant to protect the silence. That door still stands, not as barrier, but as threshold. It reminds us that peace sometimes requires enclosure, that there are places so sacred they must be hidden, not forever, but long enough to be remembered rightly. The world may not understand such a door, it may call it abandonment, or loss, or death, but those who know the pyramid's purpose understand, it is not an end, it is a sanctuary. So too in your own life there are seasons where doors close, friendships fade, paths vanish, chapters end, but they are not endings, they are seals of peace. They are the hands of heaven, gently closing what has served its time, so the memory may remain whole, so the presence within may not be scattered. Let the door close, let the stillness remain. Nothing holy is ever lost when it is sealed in love. Secret 97. The silence that outlived the builders. Long after the last architect drew his final line in sand, after the last laborer laid down his burden beneath the desert sun, after the final chant rose like breath and dissolved into the endless blue of sky, the pyramid remained, and with it the silence they left behind. Not a silence of absence, but of fulfillment. Not a silence of emptiness, but of completion, of reverence, of holy stillness shaped not just in limestone, but in longing, in memory, in the deep knowing that what was built here was not merely for the eye, but for the soul. This silence was their last gift, and it still sings, not in volume, not in melody, but in weight, in presence, in the way air shifts when you enter its shadow and feel the hush of 1,000 prayers still echoing in stone. The builders may have vanished into dust, their names forgotten by time, but their silence speaks louder than monuments that demand to be heard. And so too will your quietness, the kindness no one saw, the gentleness you offered without recognition, the sacrifices made not for praise but from love. These too are stones, laid in eternity. These too will outlive the noise. And now, as you rest, know that the silence you choose in peace becomes part of something sacred, something lasting, something that does not end when you close your eyes. Without the measurements we call precise, the pyramid rose in perfect balance, aligned not just to the four corners of the earth, but to the heavens themselves, to Orion's belt, to solstice light, to invisible truths, seen only by those who watched not with technology but with trust, not with calculations but with awe. These stones do not point randomly, they testify, they witness, they proclaim without speaking that this place was meant to touch both ground and sky. And how could this have happened, unless some greater vision guided the hand, unless purpose whispered through every block, unless love, sacred, patient love, was the blueprint that outlived the architects. This alignment was no accident. It was devotion in structure, worship in design. And the pyramid reminds us that order is not control, it is harmony, and harmony is always the echo of holiness. So too in your life, there are alignments you do not see, timings you did not plan, meetings you did not orchestrate, turns you did not understand, yet still somehow, they led you here, here where you are safe, here where you are whole. Trust the alignment. Even what feels out of place may be laying the foundation for something eternal. And tonight, as your breath softens, rest in the truth that the designer has not lost sight of you. Secret 99, the light that moves without flame. There are moments, rare and wordless, when the pyramid seems to glow, not with fire, not with torchlight, not with any visible source, but with something that radiates from within, something that fills the chamber like breath fills lungs, like prayer fills silence, like peace fills the weary. It is not light for seeing, it is light for knowing, for remembering, for becoming aware of a presence not summoned, but already here. Some call it energy, some call it spirit, but the pyramid simply offers it without condition, without demand, without asking anything but stillness. And in this light you begin to see yourself not as broken, but as beloved, not as wandering but as held. The glow does not reveal imperfections, it reveals belonging, and you carry this light, not always seen but always there, a spark placed in you before your first breath, a flame that does not consume, that never fades, that waits patiently through every shadow until you are ready to feel its warmth again. And now, in your resting hour, with no lamps to distract, let that light move through you, not to shine but to comfort, not to dazzle but to restore. The pyramid glows without fire, so do you. Secret 100, the secret that cannot be spoken, of all the mysteries held in stone and shadow, of all the alignments and echoes and hidden rooms, there is one secret the pyramid has never told, one truth it carries not in its chambers but in its stillness, a truth not hidden by design but by mercy, because no word could hold it, no mind could grasp it, no explanation could survive it. This is the secret not of how it was built or by whom, or when but why. It is the secret of sacred purpose, the secret that whispers that you were always meant to be more than dust, that your life is not a puzzle to be solved but a sanctuary to be honored, that everything holy begins in silence, that God does not dwell only in temples made with hands, but in the places where wonder is still welcome, where stillness is still sacred, where peace is not earned but received. And though the pyramid will never speak this aloud, it does not need to, because the moment you stand in its shadow, the moment you let yourself rest in its presence, you know, you feel it in the breath that slows, you hear it in the silence that deepens, you receive it in the sleep that comes not as escape, but as return. And now, as your eyes close and your thoughts soften, and your spirit becomes still beneath the canopy of night, know this: the greatest secret has already been given, it is written in you, and it will never be lost.